Hello, everyone, and welcome to D20 Woodworking. And today we are doing our Reddit reply series or a continuation of it. And we're going to do all Marvel Champion stuff today. And this is probably going to be a bit of a quicker one because I didn't have a ton that I really liked out there that I was seeing, but there's a few decent ones to get into first. So the very first thing I want to bring up is actually 5 tips and strategies for playing cleaner games. And tip number 1 for playing a cleaner game is to wash your hands, just FYI. But this is from Get Up in Game. This is a friend of our channel. If you haven't seen Get Up in Game, go support his channel, though his subscriber count's basically the same as mine nowadays. But go check it out. And he has a really good video, right? This is a pretty darn good video that goes through different things and different strategies and whatnot, and definitely worth checking out. What's interesting to me is these are all helpful, and I use a lot of these. But one of the biggest ones for me to playing a game where I don't have as many mistakes, or at least fewer mistakes, is to kind of stop assuming what the card says. There's too often that this happens a lot with like Ultron, for example. Ultron, each villain stage changes, and a lot of times with a lot of the villains, there's not too much change between like how the villain operates on stage 1 versus stage 2, stage 3. Sure, it switches a little bit, but it's not a ton. It's just usually a bit and a quick thing I pick up. The way Ultron works between each stage is like vastly different, especially 2 to 3, right? 2 to 3, where 2 he's taking out drones each time, and then the third one he's not. So it's kind of this weird thing where I have to slow down and actually like read the card is how I do things. Take your time. Don't assume what the card says. Actually read the card and read it through. And the big thing too is, and he kind of gets into this a little bit, but for example, like on the card here, it has like a when reveal. I know it's really hard to see, but whenever a card has like a when reveal or an interrupt, remembering that interrupts happen before the action, when revealed happens when the card turns over, and responses after the action, right? When I think of those 3 things, I pay attention to that keyword first on the card, and then I know, okay, when this action takes place, and it helps put things in better perspective of what should be happening. It sounds kind of weird, but it's helped me personally. It's just like focus on that keyword, and it's like, okay, it's a when defeated thing. I don't have to focus on it too much except to have like a rough idea of what that does. So that helps me a lot. And tokens. This is why I have so many tokens. Not only does it enhance the game, but I feel like it also is just visual reminders help me. And like I have when defeated tokens, and I think once people see them, they go, oh, that's actually a decent idea, because too often you're like, okay, I just have to get past that side scheme, right? But when you do, something bad happens, and too often we're like 3 steps ahead in our mind. So focus on the current action, try not to get too far ahead, and don't assume what the card says. Is some of my biggest strategies and tips. But definitely check out Get Up in Game, check out their channel and their video. I think it's a good one. So this is an interesting one because this is kind of how I used to feel. And it's one play style. I'm sorry, the title is Changing Form Characters. One play style, and specifically one character, Miss Marvel, doesn't quite make sense to me. Characters want to change form so frequently. One bad pull on a boost card can flip the main scheme in solo. So I'm always leery about flipping over unless necessary. And two-handed, they were the first to be defeated every time. Do they need to be paired with specific people? Is it best to build confused into their deck every time? Any tips and insights are appreciated. So what I've learned with this that I find kind of interesting, and I'll find the card really fast because of course I don't remember off the top of my head. But this is how I used to be too, right? This is how I used to do a lot of my, I guess, decks and whatnot, was that I felt like I had to like not flip over. And there was a lot of people that kind of helped me with this in the community that kind of, I don't know if gave tips is the right word, but just changed my perspective of that flipping over in solo is doable and is okay, but there's more strategy behind it. And for me, a big one is counterintelligence, right? When you use counterintelligence, when any amount of threat would be placed on the main scheme, discard counterintelligence, prevent 3 of that threat. To me, this is huge, right? Most villains, especially on standard, are only scheming for about 3, maybe 4. So this is stopping like the vast majority of their scheming. So it's a really good card that I use and that I enjoy, that kind of helps me flip. But even with that being so, there is just a learning of what the timing is, right? Sure, there are some villains where they only have like 3 or 4 threat threshold in the first stage, but you're not even in multiplayer meant to last that long on it. So yes, you could play Justice and play Counterintelligence or something like that to help, balance this out. You can use Surveillance Team or Surveillance Van, Space Van, whatever it is. You can use that too to increase the threshold. Like, there's a bunch of things you can do, but you don't even need to do that much anymore, because it really is just coming down to how do you time things. Yes, Confuse does help a lot, and it can help balance things out, but you do some big thwart actions, you get the thwart down, and then you just flip down, get yourself set up for that next round. You will also be able to do big actions, right? In leadership, the same exact thing, where you just have several different allies out there, or you have different cards that pump up those allies that give them extra thwart power, right? There's can't really be done as much with aggression. You need a good thwarting hero to do that, but there are other cards that let you do this. Protection is pretty good at mitigating thwart if you're playing with different defense cards, certain defense cards that let you do that, like Hard to Ignore, right? If you play Hard to Ignore. So there are ways to counteract this, but I do feel like a big part of it is just a mindset change, that you don't need to be Justice and you need to just plan out your flips better. I think too often it's a reactionary thing. It's like, oh, I should flip down because I have it, instead of thinking, okay, what do I do this turn to set up the flip down and then set up for next turn, right? It becomes a different type of game and a little bit tougher, I think, to do. But yeah, Miss Marvel, it's obviously not every hero is for every person, but Miss Marvel is one of my favorite heroes, and I think her ability to flip down is what makes her so cool. And she has enough good cards to mitigate a lot of the threat you have to worry about. Okay, last one. I thought this was interesting because I think I'm going to talk about this in a little while. But the current weakest aspect, and for those that don't remember, like the beginning of the game, for the most part, protection was always considered the weakest, right? It was the worst aspect by far. And honestly, at this point, it's not really the weakest, right? It's actually pretty decent of an aspect right now. So I want to hear from you all what you think the current weakest aspect is. And for me, it might actually be aggression. It's aggression or leadership. I don't know which. Justice, I think, is really, really strong right now. I think protection is really, really strong right now. I think leadership was really strong, and they kind of, not that they pumped the brakes on it, but they kind of pulled back a little bit. But the problem is, Make the Call is such an incredibly good card, and so is Maria Hill, and so is Squirrel Girl, that it's a little bit hard. But I feel like they're doing less for leadership right now, so it's just pulling back its strength a bit. Aggression, I think, is in a weird spot, and I have a kind of weird thing about this. So aggression was always meant to be like the main attack cards, right? But the problem is there are so many heroes out there that can already attack for a decent amount. Protection also has cards that can kind of like attack for a decent amount. Like, there's a lot of attack cards in protection now, and I feel like aggression is now being focused on like a minion slayer deck, which isn't bad, but slaying minions doesn't generally get you to win the game, right? Like, yes, it's good to stop a bunch of minions, but there doesn't feel like there's enough aggression cards to really mitigate it and control the board state. Like, it to me, it feels like the least balanced out of all of them. All the other aspects, you can do stuff to balance the amount of threat on the scheme. You can do it to defend enough or whatever, to do burst attack damage, whatever it may be. But I feel like aggression doesn't have that yet. And that was one of those aspects that early on a lot of people liked. So it's kind of this weird flip. But for me, I guess I'd probably go aggression right now. It's probably the weakest aspect. I don't think it'll stay the weakest aspect. I think there'll be an ebb and flow between all of them. But I'm curious what you all think. What do you think is the weakest aspect that is out there? Because this is a big one I'm curious about. And while you're down there, let us know your tips and strategies for playing cleaner games, as Get Up in Game stated, or just making less or fewer errors, I should say. And then flipping heroes, changing form heroes, right? Have you figured out a good system? What system works for you? Do you just not like to flip heroes in solo games? Like, what is kind of your strategy here with all this? I'm really interested in hearing that. So anyway, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Do me a huge favor, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. If you're interested, hit the join button down below to learn about ways to support this channel, and I will see you all next time.